My hands were trembling as I stood before the towering iron gates. This wasn't just another interview. This was my last shot at pulling my life together after months of rejections and dead ends. When the gates finally swung open, I had no idea that the scene waiting inside would steal the breath right out of my lungs. The driveway seemed endless, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges that led to a mansion that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Marble floors stretched out before me as I stepped inside, reflecting the glow of crystal chandeliers that hung from impossibly high ceilings. But beneath all that elegance was a silence so thick it felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. This wasn't a home, it was a beautiful cage, and somewhere in the middle of it all, hiding behind an oversized leather sofa, was a tiny figure watching me with cautious eyes. "Kai, sweetie, come out please," a housekeeper called gently, her voice warm but tinged with resignation. The child only pressed himself further into the shadows. I moved slowly, carefully lowering myself to the ground, until I was at his eye level. Being tall had its advantages, but right now I needed to be small, unthreatening. "Hey there," I said softly, keeping my voice barely above a whisper. "Want to know a secret? I'm actually pretty nervous right now." Two wide brown eyes peered at me from behind the sofa's edge, studying me with an intensity that seemed far too serious for someone so young. "You're lying." I couldn't help but smile at his bluntness. "I'm really not. New places make me anxious. Big houses especially. What's your name?" There was a long pause before he answered, each word deliberate and testing. "Kai." "Who are you?" "I'm Henry." I extended my hand slowly, like I was approaching a scared animal. "Think we could be friends?" He didn't take my hand. Instead, he just stared at it like he was trying to solve a complex puzzle, deciding whether I was worth the risk of trusting. That's when I heard it, a voice that seemed to cut through the air itself, deep and commanding yet somehow magnetic. "You have a way with children." I straightened up quickly, nearly losing my balance in the process, and found myself face to face with Levi Moore for the first time. Time seemed to slow down in that moment. He stood in the doorway wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my rent for 6 months. His dark hair was styled with precision, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and those gray-blue eyes, they looked right through me like they could read every thought I'd ever had. Powerful, intimidating, and something else I couldn't quite name. I tried to see things from their perspective. I managed to say, forcing my voice to sound steadier than I felt. Levi's gaze shifted to the small boy still hiding, and in that single glance I saw something that made my heart ache. Exhaustion mixed with helplessness, the kind of look that only comes from loving someone so much it physically hurts. "That's Kai, my son. He doesn't let anyone get close to him. 6 nannies have already given up and walked out. Getting him to school seems like an impossible dream at this point." I looked back at Kai, who had retreated even further into his hiding spot, his little arms wrapped tightly around his knees. Something in my chest twisted painfully. This wasn't just a shy kid. This was someone who had been hurt and learned to protect himself the only way he knew how. "Mr. Moore, if I could just—" "Levi," he interrupted, his tone softer now. "Just Levi is fine." There was something in the way he said it that caught me off guard. Like formalities were exhausting to him, like he was tired of the walls people put up. I nodded, trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened. "Okay, Levi. Would it be alright if I spent some time alone with Kai? Sometimes kids feel more comfortable without adults hovering." Levi hesitated for a moment, his protective instincts clearly warring with desperation. Finally, he gave a small nod and left the room, but not before throwing one more glance my way, like he was evaluating whether I was truly worthy of being near his most precious treasure. Once we were alone, I didn't push. I simply sat down on the floor a few feet away from Kai's hiding spot and pulled out my phone, opening a simple puzzle game. I made sure the sound was on just enough for him to hear the little chimes and beeps. Within minutes, curiosity got the better of him. "What's that?" His voice was barely audible, like he was afraid speaking too loud would shatter something fragile. "Just a puzzle game. Honestly, it's kind of boring. You'd probably be way better at it than me." For the first time, I saw a flicker of interest cross his face. "Can I try?" "Absolutely." I held the phone out toward him, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. Kai emerged from his hiding place, inch by inch, reaching out with hesitant fingers to take the phone. When his small hand accidentally brushed against mine, he didn't immediately pull away like I expected. He paused, stayed there for just a heartbeat longer. And so did I, hardly daring to breathe. We sat like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Me offering gentle hints when he got stuck, him slowly relaxing his rigid posture. When Levi returned, the scene that greeted him must have looked like something from another universe. Kai was sitting cross-legged beside me, completely absorbed in the game, occasionally letting out soft giggles when he solved a particularly tricky puzzle. I watched Levi's expression transform, disbelief melting into relief, relief mixing with something that looked almost like hope. It was the first time I'd seen his guard drop, even just a fraction. "Can you start tomorrow?" The question came out rough, like he was forcing the words past some invisible barrier in his throat. I glanced down at Kai, who was now looking up at me with those serious eyes, waiting for my answer with an intensity that made my decision feel monumentally important. "Yes," I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. "I'll be here." And then something miraculous happened. Kai smiled. It was small, barely there, just the tiniest upturn of his lips. But it was real. And in that moment, I knew without a doubt that my life had just changed direction in a way I couldn't possibly understand yet. As I left the mansion that evening, I couldn't shake the image of those two, father and son, both so clearly broken in their own ways, both desperately needing something they couldn't ask for. I didn't know it then, but I was about to become the missing piece they'd been searching for all along. The next morning arrived faster than I was ready for. My alarm went off at dawn, and I spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing what to wear. Something approachable but professional, casual but not too casual. By the time I pulled up to the mansion, my stomach was doing complicated acrobatics. Today was the day I had to take Kai to school. The school he'd been refusing to attend for months. I'd mentally prepared myself for tears, screaming, maybe even having to physically carry him. But when I walked through those familiar doors, what I found completely threw me off balance. Kai was standing in the foyer, already dressed in his uniform, a tiny backpack strapped to his shoulders that looked comically large on his small frame. But despite being ready, fear radiated from him in waves. His eyes were wide, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. "Henry," he said the moment he spotted me, his voice trembling slightly, "if I don't like it there, we can come back, right? You promise?" I knelt down so we were face to face, looking directly into those worried eyes. "We can leave whenever you want. But here's the thing, I'm going to be right there with you the whole time. Every single second. Sound fair?" He chewed on his lower lip, thinking it over like he was weighing the terms of a serious contract. Finally he gave a small nod. "Okay. Deal." Movement in my peripheral vision made me look up. Levi stood near the staircase, briefcase in hand, dressed in another impeccable suit. But he wasn't moving toward the door. He was just standing there, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. When our eyes met, he opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he just nodded, but there was something in that simple gesture that made my heart do a strange little flip. The drive to school was quiet. Kai sat in the back seat, staring out the window like he was watching his last moments of freedom slip away. But when we pulled up to the gate and I opened his door, his small hand immediately found mine, gripping it so tightly I could feel his pulse racing against my palm. Other parents and their children were streaming through the entrance, and I could feel their stares landing on us, like physical touches. Teachers gathered near the building's entrance whispered to each other, their shock poorly concealed. "Is that actually Kai Moore?" I heard someone murmur. "The boy who never comes?" Kai heard it too. His grip on my hand became almost painful, his whole body tensing up like he was ready to bolt. I squeezed back gently, leaning down to whisper, "Don't pay attention to them. They're just surprised to see how brave you're being today." We made it to his classroom door, but there Kai stopped dead in his tracks. He looked up at me with pure panic in his eyes. "Where will you be? You won't leave, will you?" "I'll be right outside," I promised, pointing to a bench visible through the classroom window. "See that spot? I'll sit there the entire time. If you need me, just look out and I'll be there." He stared at the bench for a long moment, then back at me, then at the bench again. Finally, he took a deep breath that seemed too big for his little body and walked inside. The teacher greeted him warmly and Kai threw one more glance my way. I gave him an encouraging thumbs up and watched as he slowly took his seat. I settled onto that bench, feeling like I'd just run a marathon. My phone buzzed almost immediately, a text from Levi. "How did it go?" "He's inside," I typed back. "Sitting in class right now." The response came back so fast he must have had his phone in his hand. "Really?" I smiled at my screen. "Really?" The day crawled by. I stayed on that bench, occasionally walking around to stretch my legs but never going far enough that Kai couldn't see me if he looked. When the final bell rang and children started pouring out, Kai emerged looking exhausted but proud. He walked straight to me and grabbed my hand again, but this time it felt different, less desperate, more trusting. On the drive back, my phone rang. Levi's name flashed on the screen and I answered on speaker so I could keep my hands on the wheel. The school called me. His voice sounded strange, thick with emotion he was clearly trying to control. They said Kai made it through the entire day. No incidents. No breakdowns. This has never happened before. I glanced in the rearview mirror at Kai, who was half asleep in his car seat. He's stronger than anyone gives him credit for. He just needed someone to believe in him. Silence stretched between us for several seconds before Levi spoke again, his voice dropping lower. "Henry, would you stay for dinner tonight? I'd like to talk to you about everything." My heart started doing that weird fluttering thing again. "Sure, I can stay." That evening, after Kai had been tucked into bed insisting I read him 3 stories before he'd even consider sleeping, I found Levi waiting for me on the terrace. The city sprawled out below us, a sea of twinkling lights that looked almost magical in the darkness. He held a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold, staring at it like it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. "I stopped believing in people a long time ago," he said suddenly, not looking at me. "When Kai's mother left, something in me just shut down. I couldn't trust that anyone would stay, that anyone would actually care about him beyond a paycheck. I stayed quiet, sensing he needed to get this out. But you," he finally turned to face me and the vulnerability in his expression nearly broke me. "You did in one day what 6 professionals couldn't do in months. You gave him something I've been unable to provide. You made him feel safe enough to try." My hands were shaking so I shoved them in my pockets. "Levi, I didn't do anything special. I just treated him like a person instead of a problem to solve. That's exactly what makes it special." He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the exhaustion lining his face, the burden he'd been carrying alone for far too long. "I don't want you to leave, Henry. Stay. Not just as Kai's tutor but as part of this family." The word family hung in the air between us, heavy with implications neither of us was quite ready to name. "I'm not going anywhere," I heard myself say, and I meant it more than I'd ever meant anything. "Kai needs me. And maybe," I met his eyes, seeing my own uncertainty reflected back at me, "maybe you need someone too." Levi's breath caught audibly. His eyes searched mine like he was looking for proof this was real, that I wouldn't disappear like everyone else had. "I need more than just someone," he whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. "I think I might need you specifically." And just like that, everything shifted. The air between us felt charged with possibilities neither of us had expected. This wasn't just about Kai anymore. This was about 2 broken adults finding something in each other that felt suspiciously like healing. Weeks blended together in the best possible way. The mansion that had felt like a cold, empty showcase slowly transformed into something that actually felt lived in. Kai's laughter echoed through hallways that had been silent for too long. Drawings covered the refrigerator, stick figure families labeled Papa, Henry and me in wobbly crayon letters that made my throat tight every time I looked at them. But the real transformation was happening in Levi. He started coming home earlier, trading late business meetings for family dinners. His smiles came more easily, reaching his eyes in a way I suspected they hadn't in years. And those dinners stopped being just meals. They became the highlight of my day, full of Kai's animated stories about school and Levi's surprisingly dry humor that caught me off guard and made me laugh until my sides hurt. One Friday evening, Kai announced with the authority of a tiny dictator that we were having a movie night. "All 3 of us," he insisted. and I get to pick. He chose a horror movie, completely age inappropriate, which both Levi and I tried to point out. But Kai pulled out those puppy dog eyes that neither of us had apparently developed immunity to, and we caved. Predictably, he fell asleep within 20 minutes, curled up between us on the oversized couch with his favorite blanket clutched in his fists. Levi gently moved Kai's head to rest on a pillow, and suddenly it was just the two of us, sharing a blanket in the dim glow of the television. The movie continued playing, but I couldn't focus. I was hyper-aware of every point where our bodies almost touched, of the warmth radiating from him, of the way the flickering light played across his features. A particularly intense scene made me jump, and I accidentally bumped into Levi's shoulder. He turned to look at me, amusement dancing in his eyes. Scared? Startled, I corrected, feeling defensive. There's a difference. Sure there is, he teased. And then, so casually it almost seemed unconscious, he draped his arm across the back of the couch behind me. Better? My heart launched itself into my throat. It was such a simple gesture, the kind of thing friends did all the time. Except we weren't just friends, were we? We'd crossed some invisible line weeks ago, and neither of us had acknowledged it out loud yet. I turned to say something. What? I wasn't sure and found him already looking at me. The movie became nothing but background noise. The whole world seemed to narrow down to just this, his eyes locked on mine. The space between us shrinking to almost nothing. The air thick with everything we hadn't said. Henry, his voice was rough, barely above a whisper. Can I ask you something? Anything. Does this feel like just a job to you? Because it stopped feeling that way to me weeks ago, and I need to know if I'm alone in that. My breath stuttered in my chest. No. It hasn't felt like just a job for a while now. Relief washed over his features, followed immediately by something more intense. Are you okay with that? With this being more? I think I'd be disappointed if it wasn't, I admitted, my voice coming out shakier than I intended. Being here with you and Kai, it's the first time in my life I felt like I actually belong somewhere. Levi's hand moved from the couch to gently take mine, his fingers threading through mine with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his usual controlled demeanor. I can't remember the last time I felt this alive. You've done something I didn't think was possible. You've made this place feel like a real home again. We sat like that for the rest of the movie, hands intertwined, not needing to fill the silence with more words. When the credits rolled and Kai started stirring, we separated naturally, but the connection had been forged. There was no going back now. The next morning brought a reality check in the form of Kai's blunt observation skills. I was in the kitchen making pancakes when he wandered in, still wearing his pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction. Henry, do you have feelings for my papa? I nearly dropped the spatula. What? Last night you were holding hands, he said matter-of-factly, climbing onto a bar stool. People in movies do that when they like each other in the special way. Heat flooded my face. How did you explain complicated adult emotions to a 5-year-old? Kai, your father and I are close friends. And sometimes, I don't mind, you know, he interrupted, swinging his legs. Actually, I think it's good. Papa smiles more when you're around. He only does that happy smile with you. Something melted inside my chest. This child who'd been so closed off, so afraid of letting people in, was not only accepting this but actively supporting it. You really don't mind? Nope, he said, reaching for the orange juice. It would be cool if you stayed forever. Then we'd be a real family, not just people living in the same house. We're already a real family, I told him, meaning every word. The best kind, the one we chose. Kai beamed at me and went back to telling me about a dream he'd had involving dinosaurs and spaceships. But I couldn't shake the weight of what he'd said, the simple truth in his childish observation. That's when Levi appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed, still in his sleeping clothes, a rare sight that made him look younger, more vulnerable. Did I hear something about being a family? Kai nodded enthusiastically. I was telling Henry that we should be a forever family, not just a right-now family. Levi's eyes met mine over Kai's head, and the intensity in them made my breath catch. A forever family, he repeated slowly. I like the sound of that. Me too, I whispered. Kai, oblivious to the weight of what was happening, clapped his hands together. Perfect. That's settled then. Can we have pancakes now? We all laughed, and the tension broke into something lighter, sweeter. But as we sat down to eat, Kai chattering away about his plans for the day, Levi's hand finding mine under the table, I felt a contentment I'd never experienced before. This was it. This was what home felt like. Later that afternoon, Levi's phone rang. I watched his face pale as he listened to whoever was on the other end. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. "That was my lawyer," he said, his voice hollow. "Catherine is back in the country. She's filed paperwork requesting visitation rights with Kai." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Kai's mother, the woman who'd abandoned them both, was coming back, and judging by the fear in Levi's eyes, this was about to get complicated in ways none of us were prepared for. Our perfect little bubble was about to be tested in the worst possible way. Catherine's arrival felt like an earthquake tearing through the foundation we'd carefully built. She showed up the next afternoon without warning, stepping out of a sleek black car, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Her makeup was flawless, her smile practiced and perfect, but when her eyes landed on Kai, something genuine cracked through that polished exterior. Tears welled up, spilling over mascara that somehow didn't run. "Baby," she breathed, arms extending toward him like she expected an instant reunion. Kai's response was immediate and crushing. He darted behind me, his small hands clutching the back of my shirt with desperate strength. "Who is she?" I watched Catherine's carefully constructed composure shatter. Her hands dropped to her sides, trembling visibly. "I'm Kai, sweetheart. I'm your mother." "No." His voice was small but absolutely certain. "You're not. I have Papa. And I have Henry. That's my family." The words hit Catherine like physical blows. Levi moved quickly, scooping Kai into his arms with protective fury radiating from every line of his body. "You should have called first, Catherine. You can't just show up like this. Would you have let me come if I'd asked?" Her tears were flowing freely now, her voice breaking. "Levi, I know I made terrible mistakes. I was young and terrified and completely unprepared for motherhood. But I've changed. I've grown up. I want my son back. 3 years." Levi's voice was ice and fire combined. 3 years without a single phone call. Not one birthday card. Not even a message asking if he was alive and healthy. "And now you want him back?" I was scared. The words came out as a near scream, raw and desperate. I panicked. I ran. "But I've been in therapy, I've worked on myself, and I'm May now. Please, Levi, give me a chance to make this right." I stood off to the side, feeling invisible and yet hyper-aware that I was very much part of this equation. Catherine's gaze shifted to me and the vulnerability in her expression hardened into something sharp and accusatory. "And who exactly are you?" The question dripped with suspicion. Levi's jaw clenched. "This is Henry, Kai's tutor, and someone very important to both of us." "Important?" Catherine's laugh was bitter. "Right. I can see exactly how important he is. This is what you replaced me with? Some random stranger playing house with my family?" The tension in the room became suffocating. Kai was crying now, confused and frightened. Levi looked like he was barely holding back rage. And I felt utterly helpless, unable to fix this situation no matter how badly I wanted to. Then Catherine dropped the bomb that changed everything. "I'm filing for custody." Her voice went cold and businesslike. "Joint custody at minimum. I have legal rights, Levi. I'm his biological mother. Any court will recognize that." The color drained from Levi's face. "You can't take him from me. Watch me." She turned and walked toward the door, pausing to throw one last look at Kai. "I'll see you soon, baby. I promise." The moment she left, Kai completely fell apart. His sobs were heartbreaking, his little body shaking uncontrollably. Levi and I both moved at once, gathering him between us on the floor, creating a protective circle around him. "Papa, is she going to take me away?" Kai's voice was barely intelligible through his tears. "Never," Levi promised fiercely. "You're my everything, Kai. I won't let anyone take you away from me. From us." But I could see the fear in Levi's eyes. We both knew the harsh reality: family court was unpredictable, and biological mothers often had advantages that seemed unfair but were legally protected. That night, after we'd finally gotten Kai to sleep, which took hours of reassurance and staying by his bedside, Levi and I found ourselves on the terrace again. the place that had become our sanctuary for difficult conversation. He looked completely broken, his usual controlled demeanor shattered into pieces. If she wins, he couldn't even finish the sentence, his voice catching. If the court gives her custody, I don't know how I'll survive it. I grabbed his hand, holding tight. She won't win. We're going to fight this. Together. He looked at me with something between hope and disbelief. You'd stand with me through this, even in court, facing all the scrutiny and questions? Always. I meant it with every fiber of my being. Levi, you and Kai aren't just my job anymore. You're my life. This battle isn't just yours. It's mine too. We're in this together, no matter what comes. Something broke open in his expression. He pulled me into his arms, holding on like I was the only thing keeping him anchored to reality. His embrace was desperate, crushing, and I held him back just as tightly. I love you, he whispered against my ear, so quietly I almost missed it. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I love you too. It was possibly the worst timing for such a confession in the middle of a crisis, with our world falling apart around us. But maybe that's exactly when we needed to say it most. When everything felt uncertain, we needed each other to know that at least this was solid and real and unshakable. We stood there for what felt like hours, wrapped around each other under the stars, drawing strength from the connection we'd built. Whatever came next, whatever battles we had to face, we wouldn't face them alone. Inside, Kai slept fitfully, probably dreaming of the confusion and fear that had invaded his safe world. But he had us. And we had each other. That would have to be enough to get through whatever storm was coming. The next morning, Levi was already on the phone with his lawyer before the sun fully rose. I could hear him in his office, his voice steady and professional as he explained the situation and began building a defense. But when he emerged for breakfast, the exhaustion was evident in every line of his face. The lawyer says we have a strong case, he told me quietly, while Kai was distracted with his cereal. Abandonment is serious, and my record as a father is solid, but Catherine's lawyer is apparently very good at what he does. This could get ugly. Then we make sure our side is stronger, I said firmly. We document everything. We show the court exactly what kind of life Kai has here, how happy and healthy he is, how much stability we provide. Levi's hand found mine across the table. When did you become so essential to my life that I can't imagine facing anything without you? Probably around the same time you became essential to mine. I answered softly. Kai looked up from his breakfast, his eyes still red from yesterday's tears. Are you guys going to make that lady go away? Levi moved to sit beside him, gathering his son close. We're going to do everything possible to keep our family together. That's a promise. And as I watched them, father and son, holding onto each other like lifelines, I knew with absolute certainty that I would fight with everything I had to protect them. This family we'd accidentally created together was worth any battle we'd have to face. The war was just beginning, but we were ready. The following week descended into organized chaos. Levi's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who looked like she ate opposing counsel for breakfast, turned our lives into an evidence-gathering operation. Every moment with Kai was documented. Every milestone, every smile, every sign of his happiness and growth became ammunition for our case. Catherine's lawyer proved to be exactly as formidable as we'd feared. Marcus Webb had a reputation for winning impossible cases through emotional manipulation and legal technicalities. He painted Catherine as a reformed woman who'd made youthful mistakes but deserved a second chance at motherhood. The preliminary hearing started, and each one was torture. Sitting in that courtroom watching Catherine cry on the witness stand about how much she regretted leaving, how therapy had transformed her, how she dreamed every night about the son she'd abandoned. It was a masterclass in performance. Even I almost believed her, and I knew the truth. When it was Levi's turn to testify, he was brutally honest. He didn't sugarcoat anything or try to make himself look perfect. He talked about the dark months after Catherine left, how Kai had stopped speaking for weeks, how they'd both struggled to survive the abandonment. But then he described the transformation, how Kai had slowly opened up, started thriving, became the happy child he was meant to be. And what precipitated this change? Patricia asked. Levi's eyes found mine in the gallery. Henry, Kai's tutor. He gave my son something I couldn't. He showed him it was safe to trust again. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge called for order, then turned her attention to me. "Mr. Henry, please approach the witness stand." My legs felt like water as I walked forward. Being sworn in seemed surreal, like this was happening to someone else. But when I looked at Kai sitting with a child advocate in the back, and at Levi whose entire future hung on this testimony, clarity came crashing back. "Mr. Henry," Judge Morrison said, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp, "please describe your relationship with Kai Moore. He's become one of the most important people in my life." "Your Honor." My voice was steadier than I expected. I started as his tutor, but it evolved into something much deeper. "He trusts me. He's opened up in ways his father said seemed impossible before. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm just someone who cares about him deeply." "And your relationship with Mr. Moore?" The question I'd been dreading. The courtroom went silent, everyone leaning forward slightly. I could feel Catherine's lawyer preparing to pounce on whatever I said next. "I'm in love with him," I stated clearly, letting the words ring out without shame or hesitation. "I love both of them. They're my family." Gasps rippled through the spectators. Judge Morrison's expression remained carefully neutral, but I saw her make a note. Catherine's face had gone pale, then flushed with anger. Marcus Webb stood up, his smile predatory. "So you're asking this court to believe that your unconventional arrangement is somehow better for a child than being with his biological mother? A mother who gave birth to him, who has legal rights to him." "I'm not asking the court to believe anything except the truth," I replied, keeping my voice level despite my racing heart. "Love and stability aren't unconventional. What's harmful is abandoning a 2-year-old and then trying to reclaim him 3 years later when it's convenient. Kai deserves people in his life who won't disappear when things get difficult." "Objection." Marcus's voice rose. "The witness is making assumptions about my client's intentions." "Sustained," Judge Morrison said. "Mr. Henry, please stick to facts about your own experience." "The fact is," I continued, "Kai knows who his family is. He feels secure with us. He's thriving. Taking him away from that stability would be cruel regardless of biology." The recess that followed felt like an eternity. In the courthouse corridor, Catherine cornered me while Levi was speaking with Patricia. "You stole my life," she hissed, her polished facade cracking to reveal genuine venom beneath. "My husband, my son, my family. You took everything from me." "I didn't steal anything." I kept my voice calm, refusing to let her bait me into an argument that could be used against us. "You walked away from it. You left a devastated man and a traumatized child behind. Coming back now that they've rebuilt doesn't make you their savior." "I'm his mother. Being a mother is about showing up," I said quietly but firmly. "It's about being there through the hard parts, not just wanting the good parts when it's convenient. You gave up that title when you abandoned them." She raised her hand like she might actually slap me, but Levi appeared, positioning himself between us with protective fury in his eyes. "Don't touch him." Marcus rushed over, pulling Catherine back. "This isn't helping your case," he muttered to her, shooting us a warning glare before leading her away. The final hearing arrived faster than I was ready for. Judge Morrison reviewed all the evidence, therapy records showing Kai's progress, school reports showing his improvement, character witnesses testifying to Levi's dedication as a father. Catherine's side presented her transformation narrative, therapy notes showing her readiness for motherhood and emotional appeals about maternal bonds. When Judge Morrison finally spoke, the entire courtroom held its breath. "This court recognizes the complexity of this situation. Miss Catherine Moore has biological rights that cannot be dismissed lightly. However, the evidence clearly shows that Kai has formed strong, healthy attachments in his current environment. Removing him from that stability would be detrimental to his well-being." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear the rest. "Therefore, primary custody will remain with Mr. Levi Moore. Miss Catherine Moore will be granted supervised visitation, 1 day per month, with conditions that she complete parenting classes and continue therapy. This arrangement will be reviewed in 1 year." Kai grabbed my hand so tightly it hurt. Levi closed his eyes, his whole body sagging with relief. We'd won. We'd actually won. Outside the courthouse, Kai threw himself at both of us, and we caught him together. "Are we safe now? Really safe?" "Yes, sweetheart. Levi said, his voice thick with emotion. We're safe. We're all safe. I looked up to see Catherine watching us from her car, mascara running down her face. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered Kai's nightmares. His fear of abandonment, the months of healing he'd needed. Some consequences couldn't be undone with tears and apologies. As we drove home, our home secured and protected now, I felt like we could finally breathe again. The battle was over. We'd survived the storm. And now we could focus on what really mattered. Being a family. 4 months passed in a blur of normalcy that felt like a precious gift. The tension that had gripped our household during the custody battle gradually dissolved, replaced by laughter and ease. Kai flourished in ways that still amazed me. His confidence grew, his grades improved, and his smile became a permanent fixture rather than a rare treasure. Levi and I stopped hiding our relationship. There was no dramatic announcement, no formal declaration. We simply stopped pretending we were anything other than what we were. Partners. A couple. In love. Kai noticed immediately, of course. Because children always do. It happened during dinner on a random Tuesday. We were eating pasta that I'd somehow managed not to overcook when Kai suddenly put down his fork and looked at us with those serious eyes that meant he was about to say something important. When are you two getting married? I choked on my water. Levi started laughing, actually laughing, his whole face lighting up in a way that still made my heart skip beats. What's the rush, buddy? Levi asked, though his eyes were dancing with amusement. Well, you love each other, right? That's what people do when they love each other. They get married so they can be a family forever. Kai said this like it was the most obvious logic in the world. I want to make sure Henry can't leave. I'm not going anywhere. I promised, reaching over to ruffle his hair. But a wedding would make it official, Kai insisted. Plus, I want to wear a fancy suit and throw flowers. You mean be the ring bearer? Levi corrected, grinning. Yeah, that. Can I? I looked at Levi, expecting him to deflect or change the subject. Instead, his expression shifted into something more serious, more intentional. He stood up from the table and my stomach did a strange flip. You know what, Kai? You're absolutely right. Levi reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box that made my brain short-circuit. I've actually been waiting for the right moment. You have a ring? An actual ring? My voice came out higher than normal. Had it for about 6 weeks, he admitted, moving to kneel beside my chair. I kept waiting for some perfect cinematic moment. But Kai just made me realize, there's no moment more perfect than this. Right here, with both of you in the home we've built together. Kai was bouncing in his seat, barely containing his excitement. Levi opened the box to reveal a simple platinum band with a small diamond. Elegant without being ostentatious. Exactly what I would have chosen if I'd been asked. Henry, Levi's voice was steady but his hands trembled slightly. You walked into our lives when we were both broken, and somehow you put the pieces back together in a way that made us better than we were before. You gave Kai back his childhood. You gave me back hope. I can't imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me? Tears were already streaming down my face. Yes. Absolutely yes. The ring slid onto my finger perfectly. Levi pulled me into a kiss that made Kai squeal with delight and clap his hands. When we finally broke apart, Kai launched himself at both of us, and we collapsed into a laughing, crying pile of happiness. I helped, Kai announced proudly. I totally helped make this happen. You absolutely did, buddy. I agreed, pulling him into the hug. We planned a small ceremony for early spring. Nothing elaborate, just close friends and a simple celebration of commitment. Kai took his role as ring bearer with the utmost seriousness, practicing walking slowly and carefully approximately 5,000 times in the weeks leading up to the wedding. The day itself was perfect in its simplicity. We held it in the mansion's garden, which the staff had transformed with white flowers and soft lighting. Kai wore a tiny suit that made him look impossibly grown up, and he walked down the aisle with such concentration that several guests had to stifle emotional laughs. When it came time for vows, Levi went first. I promised to choose you every single day, to build a life with you that honors what we've been through and celebrates what we're becoming. You and Kai are my entire world, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you both know how deeply you're loved. I had to pause to collect myself before I could speak. I promised to stand beside you through every challenge and every joy. You two gave me something I didn't know I was missing. A home, a purpose, a family. I won't take that for granted. Not ever. When we kissed as married partners, Kai's cheer was so loud it startled the birds from nearby trees, making everyone laugh through their tears. The reception was small and intimate, exactly what we'd wanted. Watching Kai dance with complete abandon, seeing Levi relaxed and genuinely happy, I felt a sense of contentment I'd never experienced before. This was what people meant when they talked about finding your place in the world. Later that night, after Kai had finally crashed from excitement and sugar, Levi and I found ourselves back on our terrace, the spot that had witnessed so many pivotal moments in our relationship. The city glittered below us, but I was only interested in the man beside me, my husband wearing his own matching ring. "Did you ever imagine this?" I asked, lacing my fingers through his. "When I showed up for that interview, terrified and desperate, did you have any idea we'd end up here?" "Not even close," he admitted, with a soft laugh. "I thought I was hiring someone to help my son go to school. I had no idea I was letting in the person who would completely transform our lives." Kai transformed things just as much. I pointed out, "He's the one who decided to trust me. He gave us permission to become a family. He knew what he needed before either of us figured it out." Levi agreed. "Smart kid." We stood in comfortable silence for a while, wrapped around each other, listening to the quiet sounds of the night. Inside, Kai slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that his family was permanent and unshakable. The custody battle with Catherine felt like ancient history now. She'd attended 2 supervised visitations, but seemed to realize she'd missed her window, that the bond we'd formed couldn't be broken by biology alone. "Thank you," Levi whispered against my temple. "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For seeing past our broken pieces to what we could become." I pulled back to look at him properly. We weren't broken. We were just waiting for the right pieces to come together. He kissed me again, slow and deep and full of promise. And somewhere in the house, Kai murmured in his sleep, probably dreaming of the adventure his life had become. This was our happy ending. Or rather, our happy beginning. Because this love, this family, this life we built from unexpected pieces, was just the start of our forever.